Audiocast test 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, everybody. It is now 9:31, so we'll commence the meeting since we have quorum. Declarations of interest. Seeing as there's none, confirmation of minutes, February 25th, 2013. Carried? Great, thank you. City Operations, Information Technology Services Department. We have a presentation. I'd like to see it. I know that Rob and his team have put quite a bit of work into this. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Rob Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce Lane Wyman. Lane's here today to talk to us about our GIS systems. At the end of each year, as part of the budget process, the ITS group informs the ITS subcommittee and through you, the rest of council, about our technology roadmap and the key things we're doing to bring things forward. For any organization, there's certain foundation applications that are key to how they work. Always there's the financial side, and we have that with the SAP technology that we use. But for a city, its geographic information systems are just as important. After all, the city is in fact defined by its geography, and its people relate to it as a geography. So the geographic information system to us is a core piece of technology. And we've been using some older technology. It's been very successful, but it's really unable to move forward with what we need to do. And Mr. Wyman has been the key person in driving this forward. We're very lucky to have somebody like Lane on the team. Lane is not just good with technology, but he's also good as a visionary, understands where both technology is going and where the city is and how it's used. So we're very lucky to have him, and he's key not only to this area, but he's also a big contributor to some of the Service Ottawa projects. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Lane.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. I'm here, as Rob said, to talk about the GIS information system upgrade that we've done, or renewal that we've done. I was here, it seems like almost 2 years ago when we kicked off this initiative to talk about what our plans were. So this is really a closing the loop of that and talk a little bit about what we delivered. So this morning I'm going to actually give a little background, which will be a refresher for when I was here a couple of years ago, talk about the renewal, what we intended to do, and then let you know a little bit about what we've achieved, what the key results are, and take any questions if you have any. So, I started with the same slide last time just to remind you what GIS is actually about. So it's for capturing, storing, analyzing, visualizing data that has some kind of spatial characteristic to it. We typically think of it as web mapping. Google's probably the most prominent, but it really covers a huge range of different types of maps and analysis that can be done spatially. And when we take that to the next level, enterprise, it's really doing that in a way that integrates data across an organization or across a number of organizations and shows that data in context together, which makes information much more powerful when you integrate it. There's a very famous GIS or geographer actually named Dr. Roger Tomlinson, who's right here from Ottawa, and world-renowned, known as the father of GIS. And there's a phrase that he said, which is 80% of all municipal information has a spatial context. And I think over the last 15, 20 years, we've seen that proven out when it comes to GIS technology. So that's the context of the technologies we're talking about. Here at the city, we've, since 1998, been running a suite of GIS-enabled applications. Most of you know it as MAP, or may know of MAP, the application, which is a little misleading in that it's not just about maps. It was a system used in our call center up until a couple of years ago, used for permits and licensing and animal licensing and all kinds of applications for managing those back office business processes. But it also includes spatial functionality that enhances what you can do with those systems. So as a real quick example, something like building permits, where there's development charges related to issuing of a building permit, those development charges vary depending on where you live in the city. And using GIS technology, it can basically in the background, calculate what those development charges should be based on where a building permit is. So you start to get that sense of the utility of GIS technology for all kinds of city business. So the previous suite, I mentioned MAP. We also had an online application called eMap, and these were kind of the core of the city's GIS. I already mentioned MAP was this enterprise application, functionality, workflow managed throughout the organization for many of the city business. In fact, there is about 2,400 users, internal users of MAP to do their day-to-day business, so fairly dominant and prominent in the city's operations. So underlying MAP and including MAP is this technology called Vision, and it's end of life. It's been end of life, not supported for about 8 years by the vendor. So the city's been kind of going it alone for quite a while. And while we've been very successful, it had just come to the time where we can't sustain this technology anymore. Same thing around eMap, again, based on very outdated technology. As well as to deliver GIS functionality to large systems like the new CSM system, or systems like the Enterprise Asset Management System, we had to have a number of different GIS technologies to make this work. So one of the drives of GIS renewal was to simplify that architecture, to try to simplify the number of different GIS technologies we were using, and hopefully get cheaper and more effective interoperability between those systems. So there was two parts to the GIS initiative. We really had the technology, GIS technology renewal, and there's also a MAP replacement. And today I'm going to be talking primarily about the GIS technology renewal. That was our first our primary task before we could start looking extensively at MAP replacement. As far as MAP, really, we're looking at operational areas driving the replacement of MAP. It's not a pure technology exercise. It also involves business transformation. So Service Ottawa has played kind of a key role in kicking off that replacement of MAP with CSM as an example. Up until CSM was implemented in the call center agents were using MAP, request for service, for taking those calls. So this has retired a portion of MAP. We have enterprise permits and licensing going to be implemented later in the year. Again, it will retire functionality around permits and licensing approval. So back in 2008, which is quite a while ago now, we developed a strategy to really replace that GIS technology and do it in a way that leveraged knowledge and investments the city had already made. So again, the goal was really to simplify that GIS architecture, and we wanted to make sure we were on vendor-supported technology. After 8 years of not having vendor-supported technology, it was pretty critical we did that. We also wanted to really position ourselves appropriately, and what I mean by that is, as new back office type systems or new operational systems or new advancements in technology, web technology came along, we wanted to be able to take advantage of those things. And so we really needed to look at supporting channels like web and mobility, those types of things through our GIS architecture. So this just shows a real simple kind of trajectory bringing us to where we are now. So 2008, the strategy. Between 2009, we did the planning and the actual implementation. I think I was here in May of 2011, and we were just kicking off the actual work of the project. 2013, today, we have renewed or replaced our GIS technology and unified in technology called ESRI ArcGIS, and it's used to support virtually all of the spatial requirements the city has today and will continue to support moving forward for quite a while. Because of the complexity, this was a fairly huge task, and I kind of mentioned, 2,400, 2,300 users of MAP. There's 600 or 700 users of desktop GIS. It's a huge user community with a lot of varied needs. So we took the GIS renewal project and we broke it up into 4 sub-projects. We had a GIS roads data model. Anybody that's dealt with addressing or roads knows it can be quite complex, and the focus of this initiative was to have a unified process that crossed all city boundaries, all the city internal operational boundaries, and made sure that we were sharing one set of road data, one set of address data as much as possible, and everyone who had a role in the creation, naming, and maintenance of roads, the data around roads, were integrated into the same process. So there's a unified process that was implemented in January of 2013. There's minor tweaks over time, but it's been a huge step forward in us maintaining road information. Vision, which was the underlying spatial data behind MAP, really we've edited all of the data. We've migrated all the data editing from Vision into the new GIS architecture, again completed in May of 2012. The architectural design that underlies all of our enterprise GIS was completed, including the implementation of that in September of 2012. And the last piece is the MAP guide or EMAP replacement, which EMAP is available both internally through Ozone and a version that's available on ottawa.ca to the public. And this last sub-project was to retire that, and we completed the work related to that December 2012. There's official launch details to come, and our colleagues in Service Ottawa will be driving forward when the new application is launched on ottawa.ca. So some of the key renewal results, the things that I think have been most bring most value to the city. One of them is this application, the replacement for EMAP, which we're calling Geo Ottawa, and it essentially it'll replace that EMAP application and really represents the final step in the GIS renewal. When we complete that, GIS renewal is complete. Our focus will move to replacement of MAP, and that'll happen over the next couple of years. Well, the city still will rely on Vision technology. It'll only be for MAP, and it'll only be for the life of MAP. So once MAP is retired, we can say goodbye to that old technology. The important nuance in this is, even though the technology, the Vision technology will still exist, it's being fed by the new enterprise GIS technology that we implemented. So it's no longer the underpinning to the city's spatial capabilities. It's now kind of byproduct, or it's kept alive by the city's GIS architecture. We focus, and I'm sure over the next several months there'll be a lot of focus on Geo Ottawa and that kind of what you view in mapping. But really the strength of the GIS renewal comes in, I refer to it as an ecosystem, the data ecosystem that feeds enterprise GIS. And the reason why it's so important and powerful is we've created an ecosystem that has people maintaining data as part of their business when it's spatial throughout the organization. We're talking through public works, infrastructure services, environmental services, planning and growth, virtually any area, parks and recreation, any area. And on the left side of this slide, you see all of these little people. These are all those people maintaining data. And they do it in what we call federated databases, a collection of databases that allow us to ensure their data is secure and they control that data being maintained. But as they complete those edits, they're pushed to a published database that's really accessed by MAP, Enterprise Asset Management, SAP. All of the systems throughout the organization access that published database, including Geo Ottawa. And it means parts of the organization are starting to work from the same spatial data set. They're not taking snapshots or subsets of data from one area and sharing it with other areas. This is extremely powerful because it means we can enhance, for example, GeoOttawa. We can make it appear to have more functionality by having data in a new area just start to maintain their data in Enterprise GIS, and it becomes available in GeoOttawa. Just talking about this ecosystem in a little more detail. Again, I mentioned EAM, but there's CSM also gets its data fed, and you're seeing a couple snapshots of this data in different venues. The Enterprise Permit and Licensing application will also be sharing the same data, TSM, SAP. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important this single spatial data ecosystem is in removing duplication of effort, duplication of data maintenance, and also making sure that the same data, the same answers to questions come out of all of the different operations based on a unified data set. Talk just for a minute about GeoOttawa. GeoOttawa is, again, if you've seen EMAP, it's a replacement for EMAP. Hopefully it's more than that. The GIS renewal project's goal was to replace EMAP, but at the same time we tried to take a fresh look at that mapping application, and some of the things of note will be the fact that it looks very much like Google and works like Google. People understand how Google Map works. Why reinvent that? It makes much more sense to work or design towards what people already know. Because of that data ecosystem, we can create other iterations of GeoOttawa, something called GeoOttawa Lite, for example, that offers a subset of technology but works much better on mobile devices, or much better in situations where the computer technology isn't as new and as powerful. We also, I mentioned mobility. We can create mobile versions of the application, also accessible versions of the application. Just spending a minute on accessibility. Complex mapping, which is what this refers to when we talk GeoOttawa, is a huge challenge, but we're certainly hoping over this year to really push the envelope around accessible mapping. And while from a pure legal point of view, the city has an exemption on accessibility for accessible mapping, we feel we can push that envelope, we can do better, and we can make that mapping more accessible. GeoOttawa, to talk a little bit about it more, like EMAP, offers a web mapping interface and has been on Ozone since December. It went live on Ozone, so any of you could access it. GeoOttawa also supports embedding maps within pages of Ottawa.ca. So quite often, and in this image below, you can see it makes reference to the McNabb Recreation Center, and there's an embedded map. That's still GeoOttawa, even though it's not the application. It's being embedded in a web page. So it really will help as well, bringing context to pages, web pages within Ottawa.ca, but with live data again, that data that is being fed from the operations out of the City of Ottawa out into the pages of Ottawa.ca. So as I mentioned, with GIS Renewal Complete, map replacement is definitely our focus over the next several years. It's a very large application with tendrils into many, many areas of the city, so it will take time. But the strategy is really to allow the operations and the transformation projects that have been happening, primarily related to Service Ottawa, but more generally to service excellence, to push or drive those initiatives forward that will replace MAP. Where we're sitting now with MAP, it doesn't represent a huge cost, but it does represent a barrier to doing mobility and web. So as those requirements come out of the operational area, then we can replace those parts of MAP that are still being used. And as I mentioned, the next major one is enterprise permit and licensing that will replace a huge portion of MAP and push us very quickly forward on the replacement of MAP. So that was the Whirlwind tour status update. If there's any questions.
First of all, thank you for that presentation. I know there's a lot behind the scenes that is done, and I'm quite excited because, I mean, our current system, even though it appears to be held together with, duct tape and bubble gum at this point, we're headed somewhere really well and really good. Also, I believe this would be the first time as an amalgamated city we have an application that's coming together instead of taking one that pre-existed and trying to extend it to our city. So that's quite exciting. And just as a footnote, as a city councillor doing our jobs, having a mobile version will be quite exciting. I know that's always a challenge for us. I'm always calling back to the office. Can you have a look? I can't see it on my device. Any questions with our committee? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on all of the hard work and heavy lifting on the project. I have a question with regards to the architecture framework, and I'm working from the drawing that you've got on slide 12. And on the left-hand side, you've got all your client groups, which are feeding all of the data into their own databases, which is then, I guess, consolidated up into the the database 2.0, the View database, right? So, first of all, first question would be, what is the time flow between those smaller databases and the View database? Is it instantaneous? Is it live update, or is it updates every night at midnight, or does it vary by client?
So it actually varies by the transaction, I'll say. So in the GIS world, there's some data transactions that we call long transactions. And if you can imagine putting a subdivision is something that doesn't necessarily happen in a second. It takes maybe all day, sometimes a couple of days for them to create that legal line work and be able to have it all connected properly, have all the referential integrity. So it's primarily controlled by the type of transaction. There's a lot of the data, and I'll use Parks and Rec data as an example, where as they make updates, those updates are being pushed, and they're pushed immediately. Whereas these long transactions, they're really pushed when the long transaction is completed. So from the time a new road is being created to the time it actually is ready to update, maybe half a day, that type of idea. What's important to understand is it's based on the operations and their data update life cycle. It's not based on a batch or a routine or a time on a clock. It's really the nature of the data that decides when it is public data. When I say public, I'm referring to more than just available for the public, but I mean data that can be shared throughout the organization.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So it's really driven then by the individual users. They determine, is this long transaction time data, or do I want this data to go, now, kind of thing? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. There's a step, and I'll call it, this data is now committed is the language I'll use, and when that data is committed, then it becomes part of the published database.
Okay. And is it a one-way relationship only, or is there a two-way relationship? So in other words, if one of my data sets, for example, comes from public health, and they maintain databases of a variety of things, if there's another database which is maintained by paramedics, the paramedics are now engaging in, community paramedicine programs. So they're actually, going into people's homes, not in an emergency situation. And when they go in there, they find out things as part of their, their work set that they may want to feed back to public health. So when they enter that data, wherever they enter it, does it feed back into public health, or does public health need to come into the data set 2.0, view that data as a whole set?
So essentially, for data maintenance, data sets typically have a custodian. Old language in the industry, they called them data owners. The City of Ottawa owns all the data, so we've tended to refer to them as custodians. They're doing the maintenance. And each data set has a custodian. So using your example where paramedics are out, if they were picking up, I'm trying to think of an example, something about roads, for example, they wouldn't actually be making updates to that data. They're not custodians of that data set. They would feed that back through the operations. But any data that is under their stewardship, that they own, that they make updates, does get pushed throughout the organization. So the concept is in these edit databases, all the data from these edit databases go to publish. All the consumers consume the published database and have the up-to-date information. There's certainly an opportunity, and I'll use the roads data model one, where it's actually a shared responsibility for maintaining roads. In those cases, the stakeholders along that process have control of that data in their part of the process, and their updates would be reflected in that data set.
Okay, so there is a mechanism, if I'm hearing you correctly, there is a mechanism to allow, our frontline employees, which is the bulk of city employees, no matter what, what division they're operating in, to be able to collect data through their eyes and ears and feed it back. They may not have the authority to actually, green light it being entered into the system, but they have the ability to feed it back, correct?
Absolutely.
If I'm a public works employee cleaning up a park and I see something which I consider to be, a public health concern or a concern for fire and safety or something like that, I still have and I see it every week. It's there every week.
Absolutely.
And, so they have a mechanism now to feed that back. Correct?
Absolutely. Yes. And as just like EMAP, as we go out to ottawa.ca, then we get a lot more eyes on the road. We get the public, and again, that feedback mechanism is very important for ensuring the quality of the data as well.
Okay. I ask because I think there's probably value in, at some point, a statistical sweep that could, better better enable us to see where our data is coming from, right? If 12% of all, public health risks get identified by Parks and Recs employees, then that's a valuable piece of data that, perhaps could factor into program development for that, for Parks and Rec. But
sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And great. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of this information as councillors we don't get access to. Is making these new systems going to enable us when we want to find out about a project in our ward, which we now have to go through staff, we'll have to look it up and send it to us because we can't find it immediately when we may have a request that would be nice to have it now instead of 2 days later. Are we going to get that access?
I have to be careful because I can't speak for the operations. It's important. I'm here kind of talking about the technology and what we've put in place. From a pure architecture to support that, absolutely, it exists. It really takes the different operational areas, maintaining the data, and using this ecosystem to make that data available. I know the group responsible, for example, for the public works type or the works type capital projects are very interested in utilizing or leveraging this technology to make that information more readily available.
I'm not talking about the public. I'm talking about council, and they're supposed to work for us.
No, absolutely.
A quick second. This is based on a discussion that occurred at the previous City Council meeting, and I guess there was interpretation of NFIPA and privacy legislation behind it. So from a technology perspective, you can definitely answer to. But I believe this is on the next FEDCO agenda. You were at Council, weren't you?
Yeah, no, I know. This is not a new discussion. This is a discussion that's been going on for some years.
From a technology perspective, my understanding is that the capabilities do exist, but the whole discussion that Councillor Clark raised at the previous council meeting that you attended was quite clear. We'll discuss that at FEDCO. Any further questions,
Yeah,
Councillor
no, I do,
Wilkinson?
yeah. As part of that whole thing, even what is available publicly now, there are search engines to try to find things. I have not found the city search engine to be very helpful. And that's on the website or even on our own internal one. I put in the name of a bylaw type of thing, and I don't get it. The best way to find things on the city website is to go through Google. That doesn't sound to me like a good way of accessing information. Is that part of what you're doing to try to make it that what we do have, we can actually find?
Search covers a lot of different types of data. With this GIS, what we're doing is making more information available that can be used in that way. I do think that Google is, from a public perspective, the most common way that people do access the data. And so we do pay attention to that. I know that Service Ottawa is working very doggedly on improving the search capability. There were some significant changes and upgrades that went into that. We have not brought those forward to the ozone environment, the internal intranet, and that's something that we do have to do.
Well, the internal internet is as bad as the public one, frankly. I can put in the exact name of a project, and it doesn't come up at all.
Yeah,
Which really is weird, because the first word you put in is the only one they seem to look at. Anyway, I'm glad you're looking at that, because it will be helpful. The other question I had was, the city is made up of the city departments, so-called, but there are a lot of other agencies with separate boards, the library board, the police board, the health board, the public housing board, all of these. How do we integrate that information in so that if the public health board is, for example, helping the community housing, which I know they are, on certain issues, I don't see how we integrate to get that information together at this time.
I think in the past we've had a real problem with that, where these groups are outside sometimes of the discussions that are going on, and we've taken steps with the new governance model that we've put in for managing IT internally to make sure that Ottawa Public Library, Ottawa Public Health are part of that process.
But the public housing isn't yet, as far as I know.
Public housing isn't, but I've personally met with the public housing folks a couple of times and talked to them about what they're doing and arranged some informal contacts between them and the IT departments. So we're striving to have, Mr. Wyman talked about the federated model of data. We're striving to have a federated model of governance so that all of these groups are learning about each other. The key thing, first of all, is just to share what all we have so we're not duplicating, and so we're bringing this together. And that's the
I know
steps we're
Councillor
taking.
Tierney has stayed on as chair of the IT committee at the public housing, so he's going to be a connecting link there. But I think it is time we did that, because it's kind of frustrating sometimes that information gets skewed a bit because it's not known well.
I agree, and I think there's also opportunities
I would
for
really
savings
be
there.
interested in, because I'm now involved with the public housing, but it's for anybody else, even on the library board, it's been an issue, that I find out when this kind of thing is going to happen, and if there's anything you need to have happen that we can help you to get sure that works together. We're open to doing that.
I will definitely take advantage of that, but I will say that there's been a really fabulous sense of cooperation bringing these groups in and starting just to communicate.
Well, I think everybody wants things to work well. There's no question about that. It's just basically making it happen. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor DesRoches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess two of the reasons why we set up this subcommittee was, one was to continue the leadership that we're showing, I think, in IT, with a goal of greater efficiency and productivity at the city, as well as improving service. The second, I think, is to bring greater accountability to the projects, all right, so that they stay on budget and that they do exactly what we were sold on when they were approved by council. And I think to centralize the decision-making process for IT. I appreciate that today's presentation is really just on the guts of this new system and the integration. But one of the things that I think we need to keep track of is the efficiencies that will come from this project. So eventually, at some point in time, when you put the on switch, we should see that reflected somehow in budgets, saying, well, we have a lower FTE demand because we have simplified the process and adopted some of the latest technologies. So how do we as a committee track what will be the efficiencies that are brought about as a result of what is a very big project started in 2008? So I hope we will see efficiencies that flow from this, and I think we should be, as a committee, be holding all the branches accountable, saying, in 2008 you told us this was going to be helping us with our efficiency targets. Now you need to show me how that is reflected in the budget. Because I think given, as we see from slide 12, the large number of players, the numerous branches that you're bringing together, we have to hold, I think, the administration to account for whatever was promised in 2008 as far as efficiencies.
I very, very strongly agree with what you're saying. I think it's something that we have started to focus on better, and that there is room for more improvements, which we're starting to progress. I think start with the Service Ottawa project, where there have been identified efficiencies all the way along. This predates some of that work, but has been rolled into that. You'll see as we come out with the next version of the next year's roadmap that will start to identify more what the values, and the values can be efficiencies, as you say. They can also be enabling new opportunities. One of the biggest things in this diagram that we have in front of us is not just savings, but it allows things to happen which were impossible before because people were talking a different language around data. So it doesn't necessarily always measure in numbers, but it measures in service that comes out. It's key for us to identify those targets up front, communicate them to you. At the same time, we talk about what investment is needed and keep you updated on those sorts of things. And what you've seen with Service Ottawa is something I think you'll see us doing on a regular basis and improving on.
Okay, appreciate that. It may not be today. Again, we're focusing on more the mechanics and the machinery of this. But one of my fears is that we achieve the efficiencies and branches backfill those positions for whatever reasons. Like, we should be seeing in the budgets either a reduction in FTE or some sort of budgetary impact in favor of the taxpayer once we turn the switch on. So that's what I'll be looking forward as we go forward. I think greater clarity in terms of the actual efficiencies that will be brought to bear as a result of this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Cadre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just coming back to, you mentioned the fact that with putting data together like this, or this mechanism, it would be also for the public to use, right? Are we going to make the website a little bit more manageable, more accessible to the public? Because right now what I'm hearing from my residents is, it's too difficult to navigate. There's not enough information, or the information I'm looking for is hidden in some corner of the website. So would that be working towards this?
I think that is something that we're always looking to improve on. I can't speak specifically to Service Ottawa plans, which you'll be hearing throughout, but I know for a fact that the team is looking at ways to do that, to improve the website. There was a significant jump with the new website that went out. There's another version that will be coming out shortly. I'm not sure of timing exactly, but there will be constant improvements in that area. It's always a challenge in what different people want to do, which things get onto the front page. There's so much information available from the city. It's never easy to have everything on the front page and easily available, but you're seeing the group reacting to the feedback that they're getting through the website, through the 311 process, to do a constant series of improvements in that area. That's offset by the fact that with things like Geo Ottawa, there's more and more things becoming available. So it's always a balancing act that we'll be working on.
Thank you for that, Mr. Collins. But my concern is once you put this together with all the information that you're putting into this, it's great to have the information, but unless somebody can access it, whether it be, myself or my colleagues, versus also the citizens of the city, that they're easily able to get that information that's very valuable and that's being put on our system here.
And Mr. Collins, I think when it comes to usability, I think probably Donna Gray from Service Ottawa is best to answer that. And to the councillor's point, I understand, I've had well over 15 years in web accessibility career. It's subjective. There's always going to be, someone wants this gadget here, somebody wants 50 buttons on the first page, some people want one. But there is a best practices I assume that we do follow. Jacob Nelson's a good one. Since we've gone to Drupal, I've definitely had great feedback from the mobile viewing aspect of things. But I'd like Donna Gray maybe to speak to that aspect, if that's okay with the committee, because I think it's more in her bailiwick than it is Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the website and where the website is in terms of search and ability to find information, I'll let Jeff just go into a little bit more detail, technical detail in a minute. But really, the main intent last year was to get us a better platform and just start to look at how we would structure and format information away from departments into a client view. We know that the website isn't where we want it to be right now, and we're aggressively this year trying to get both content, so we're out looking with every department, trying to make sure that we have all of the content that they want to display to citizens in a format that citizens want. And we're looking at improvements in terms of getting users to tell us as well and experiment with us and give us feedback on the website. And we have a number of ways right now that residents can give us feedback, and we're planning on actually doing some more usability testing. So any comments, questions, concerns that you have about the website, we're happy to do that because we really have a team aggressively working on fixing that, as well as some technical solutions in terms of the search. But in terms of the information and the data that you're seeing today, and the work that IT has done to create this infrastructure, what will be really, really exciting from a citizen's perspective, and what the website now allows us to do, is it allows us to create different ways that our residents can see different types of information based on their location and what they're doing. And what we're planning on releasing in the next quarter, and you'll see it in our IPD update, is what's called a new functionality on the website called In My Neighborhood. And what that will allow a resident to do is to go on to a specific space on the website, be able to identify where they are, and select the different layers of data and information that they want to see within their particular ward, or their particular residence, or their particular geographical area. And what we're working on right now is creating that view. And then we will be able, as departments and as operations, as we get feedback from residents to say, this is the kind of information we'd like to see, more and more information, we can enhance that view as we actually move forward. So that will be able to give you a really good view, and residents a really good view of where the ability to have one place then to see the data, and an ability to actually get departments thinking about putting their information and the data out so the public can actually see it in a way that's usable for the public. The second piece that you'll see on the web that's an enhancement as well in terms of the residents being able to find and access the things that they want is creating the My Account, which will allow a resident to go in, to select, to enter a password, and then to be able to select a number of things that they would like to be able to see and have access to. And that will be coming in the fall. You'll start to see that concept as well. So what I'm hoping today is I leave the sense of the committee that the website is very much, a first phase of building the infrastructure, and we are really, really aggressively this year and into next really trying to make it much more content focused in what residents want, much more usable, and really getting feedback from residents and make sure we're responding to that both from service and information on the web. So maybe, Jeff, if you want to speak to just some of the technical search solutions.
Thank you, Donna. Mr. Chair, as Donna mentioned, there's kind of multiple aspects to getting to content on the site. One of our challenges is the breadth of the content and the number of lines of business and services that the city provides makes the depth of content available very large. So it's important that we get people to what they want as quickly as possible. Donna mentioned a couple areas we're looking at, and the move to the open source Drupal platform gives us a foundation to build on that. In parallel with that move to the Drupal platform, we also implemented an open source search engine, which is called Solar. That search engine, while we now have just built the foundation, provides us the ability to get much more sophisticated in how we search and how we return results and react to how people search. More in the area of the way that Google tracks and presents search results. So right now we're just kicking off over the next quarter an extensive kind of review and rework of the content areas to make sure that we can track the hierarchy, what results are better than others, and present content in a more favorable manner. We're also looking at how we split up the various content areas, for instance, council documents, policies, procedures. Some of these currently percolate to the top of the search, which means while you may be looking for something specific, what you get is a long list of documents that aren't really relevant to you. So we're reworking how that content is indexed and accessed so that we can bring the more relevant results to the top. So that work will be happening over the next quarter, and you'll see over the summer as we launch those initiatives that we expect the search results to improve drastically.
Thank you very much. And just one further question, in terms of the items that, some of the items that I saw on here, and going back to Councillor Wilkinson's question about other agencies. One of those agencies in the city is 211. Would we be recording some of their data onto this? I know some of it is confidential or through the MFIPA request, but would we be handling that service also on this? And the other part of that question is things like Ottawa Hydro. Is that a possibility to include? I know, I'm not trying to make this a thing for everybody, or a bucket that catches everything, but at least look at the Ottawa Hydro scenario and see if we can include some of their data and information going forward on this.
I can't speak specifically to any particular 211 data. In all, their data is captured somewhere in the systems, and one of Mr. Wyman's objectives is trying to come up with that single data architecture that brings everything together. So, as I say, I can't say specifically that follow the track of any one, but in general, yes, it is all in there and it is all captured, and we're seeing some tighter integration with that information along with the 311 information. But obviously, we have to respect the privacy around that, and that's a first priority. That's on top of everything. As for Ottawa Hydro, we haven't done anything specific in talking with Ottawa Hydro. I certainly wouldn't exclude it as something that we should look at. It's a matter of how much we want to bite off at any one time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any further questions? Seeing as there's none, thank you very much for the presentation, and I really look forward to seeing a lot of these tools out there. Next up, we don't have any in-camera items. Information previously distributed was the 2013 Service Ottawa Program Update. On that, carried. Notices of motion, inquiries, other business, and adjournment. Great. Thank you very much.